Hey everybody, it's Rothbar's Disciple here. I'm bringing you guys another video on Bitcoin. This video is going to actually walk the line between sort of Bitcoin and politics, and I'm specifically targeting Propertarians when I'm talking about this. Now you have to understand, I've been newly introduced to Propertarianism, mainly by videos by a guy named John Mark on YouTube. They're great videos, and then I've started sort of following a guy named Kurt Doolittle. Now, when I read a lot of the things by Kurt Doolittle, like his stuff is amazing. They talk about things that I thought, I was the only one who had talked about. For those of you who have watched my channel for a long time, you guys know I'm a big fan of Critarchy, which is rule by the judges. They have sort of a version of Critarchy is what they promote, just rule by the judges, a decentralized rule by judges that sort of has its roots in, I think, common law. I'm not fully educated on Propertarianism. I'm sort of new to it, and Propertarianism itself is a bit of a juvenile philosophy, only in that it's very new. Okay, most philosophies have been around for hundreds of years. Propertarianism has been around for a couple of years. So when I say juvenile, I don't mean juvenile in that the people who follow it are juvenile. They're by far some of the most educated people I've ever seen. And the things they say, like everything that I've always wanted libertarians or Rothbardians to be, these Propertarians are. Now, I've always, if you've watched my videos, you know that I lean heavily towards the Hoppian and the late Rothbard version of libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism. And I've actually got my own videos detailing why I think actually, some of their theories are wrong. I've had my own video why I think Hoppe's argument from argument is wrong and how you can fix it. His discourse ethics argument or whatever. Um, and when I actually started reading some of Kurt Doolittle's stuff, he said similar things on the views of Hop. He still likes to quote Hop for a lot of the things he does. Or Hoppe, I'm not sure exactly the specific way to say it. Maybe I should know since he's one of my biggest influences. But anyways, these guys, the one thing that sets these guys apart is there's two things. Their understanding of, I don't know if I want to say sociology and psychology, but one of the most educational things that I've learned from Propertarians and their understanding of the world was actually the drive for status by a lot of people in the modern world, and how a lot of the ills of the modern world come from people, betraying their values in order to gain status that they don't have in their own personal life. Now, I never, like, you guys know that I absolutely hate the vast majority of the Bitcoin world. I think it's a joke. I think we've really squandered the biggest opportunity to gain massive power and to strip the money power away from Marxist types and put it in the hands of freedom lovers, and specifically in the hands of the white Christian Western world. But we've been failing really badly in our drive for this, and I've noticed that there's a lot of idiots that get a lot of support and power and status within the world of Bitcoin, and I never understood exactly how or why until I listened to Propertarians. And their basic argument is that if you get low status people who don't really have much success in their life, you can get them to basically betray their community, betray basically everything if you just give them status, the status that they so desperately crave. And this is something that I see going on throughout Bitcoin. um, you know I've always just called it the circle jerk, but just where people just want to be a part of the I don't know what you want to call it, the inner circle, I guess, and a lot of these people in the inner circle are not intelligent, and it sort of confused me until I listened to Propertarians explain the drive for status by low status people and how they just betray their entire communities, okay? And so I've learned a lot from these guys. However, again, like I said before, their philosophy is somewhat juvenile. It's very young, and so there's obviously going to be not necessarily mistakes, but maybe a little bit of naivete in some of the things that they say. And one of the big points of Propertarianism is that you're really not going to ever achieve freedom without a civil war. However, in the case of a civil war, because right-wingers and because white Christians basically own all the guns, and they're heavily represented within the police and the military, this tends to shift the power towards the right wing in the case of a civil war. Now, I don't have any problems with this argument, except I think it's going to be a lot harder to gain the allegiance of the military, specifically the military I want to talk about rather than just the police. I think the police are heavily indoctrinated. The military, to some extent, is indoctrinated in political correctness, but the police are heavily indoctrinated with political correctness, so it's going to be much harder to gain support of the police than it will be the military. And the truth is that if you want warriors, it's really the military who you want. I come from a military family, like basically, my family's careers, they're dominated by the military. I was thinking about joining the military myself. I was in the ROTC in college, but it's very hard. Like the U.S. has only been fighting wars for Islam, basically. We fight wars to protect Islamic peoples rather than white Christians. It's hard to get behind fighting for something you don't believe in, you know what I mean? And so I ended up leaving the ROTC, and I don't want people to think I have military experience. I do not. I do not have military experience. I do have a lot of combat experience. I was one of the best wrestlers in the state of Iowa. Throughout my high school career, I was good enough that I could have wrestled at not a Division I school, but Division II, Division III schools. I didn't pursue that either. I actually got a lot of injuries doing this, but I understand combat and I understand the military mind. One of my favorite things to do is learn military history, and it's actually one of the things that I've been trying to teach to libertarians and anarchists or whatever. But libertarians and anarchists keep moving to the left, and I think it's about time to just abandon them and deem them as a lost cause. But the one thing I've been trying to tell them is, like, you can't win a defensive war. If you know anything about strategy, there is, like, if you fight a defensive war, you've already lost, okay? And so when libertarians promote the non-aggression principle, which again I sort of despise because it's not an actual workable ethos. That's why I promote the rule of two of Rothbard, because that tells you specifically how punishments are created, and the proper punishments for certain things. And it also tells you that you don't have to wait for someone to commit a crime against you in order for you to defend yourself. But I've been trying to promote these things to libertarians I've been highly unsuccessful, to be honest. So I really enjoy the fact that Propertarians, they support freedom and whatnot, and they are the one thing that they do support also is the idea of defense. Like the basic point of society is to have people come together collectively to defend property, to defend land. Okay, and so they are, I would say, pro-military. They're a lot more willing to use violence in order to defend their own things, which is absolutely essential. Okay, but when they talk about the military and trying to gain support of the military, where I think they go wrong is that they think that political views will mean that the military allegiances will move in their direction, and this is not actually true if you look at history. One of the biggest examples of this is George Armstrong Custer, who's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, general in American history. It's insane, his accomplishments. His brilliance as a tactician is basically unrivaled. For those of you who don't know, the North probably, there's a good chance the North would not have won the Civil War without Custer. But what's interesting about Custer is he was actually an ardent Southern Democrat, and the reason why he fought for the North is was that they paid for his schooling and education, and so he thought he owed them a debt. And the other thing you have to remember about soldiers is a lot of them come from low-income families, and money's a massive incentive. Okay, so if you don't pay a soldier, how do you expect to gain their obedience? If they can't feed their family, what makes you think that they're going to fight for you? Even if they believe in what you believe in, obedience in the military, it's essential. They're more obedient than other men. They're obedient to a leader, and there's a reason why they're obedient to these leaders. They don't follow nobodies, and you actually see that if you talk to a lot of military members now. They don't like a lot of the leadership, and the military is not what it once was, so they actually are ripe for trying to give them a new leader and put them on a new path, I guess you would say. But if you don't pay the soldier, how can you expect to gain their obedience? And without a current source of funds, how do Propertarians get an obedient army? And so where I think Bitcoin comes into play is Bitcoin, like if you just look at the history of Bitcoin, in one decade it went from a fad that everybody made fun of to having a market capitalization of 300 billion. Now the market capitalization of Bitcoin is much lower than that, and you guys know, like, I'm not some sort of I'm not trying to push Bitcoin onto people or having people buy Bitcoin. In fact, I'm pretty sure Bitcoin's going to die. I'd actually like to be the guy who kills Bitcoin. What we're going to talk about is actually killing things within Bitcoin. It's incredibly profitable, like to an insane extent that would make your mouth drop. You know what I mean? It'd make your jaw drop, and it's insane. It would make you drool if you knew how profitable it was. But the reason why propertarians need to pay attention to this is because if Bitcoin can succeed as a new form of money, it is the new money power. Okay, and so if propertarians do not control the money power, they're gonna be in for a world of hurt. It's very hard to succeed if you do not control the money power, which propertarians absolutely do not control right now. Okay, and so the thing you have to understand about Bitcoin is it contains a fatal socialistic flaw that allows it to be dethroned. And like I said, when you dethrone a crypto, you can do it in an incredibly profitable way, and through a method that displays your own power in an unmistakable and an undeniable way. And if you do it this way, this will actually gain you a lot of influence. It'll be very persuasive to military types because they are most influenced and persuaded by displays of power. They don't want somebody to talk about economics and philosophy or technology. They want you to prove through your actions that you are the biggest, baddest motherfucker in the world, okay? And so this is why I think propertarians should be paying attention to this. And again, I'm not trying to promote propertarians into buying crypto or getting involved. I'm just saying this is something you really should be watching, and specifically some of the things that are going on now. Some of the things that I've actually been pushing, some of the theories I've been pushing, I think are going to be very interesting to propertarians, and it's something you guys should really be watching. But the flaw within Bitcoin is that its supply is determined by a quota. Okay, so within Bitcoin, the inflation rate is determined by something called the block reward. This is just how many coins are mined over, like each block is mined every 10 minutes, and so the block reward, if a block is mined every 10 minutes, the block reward, the amount of coins that are rewarded to miner for finding this block, or the amount of new coins created, that determines the inflation rate. Okay, the problem with Bitcoin's inflation rate is it's a quota. It started out at 50 Bitcoin. Every 4 years it drops in half. Right now it's at 12.5 Bitcoin. And it keeps dropping and dropping, and eventually it will be zero. Okay, so there's a couple issues with this. One is that the fact that it's a quota, and the reason why this quota was created is because it gave a massive amount of power to Satoshi. Okay, when Bitcoin was first created, nobody knew about it, and this was the time where Bitcoins, or there were more Bitcoins available to be mined than at any other point, and there were also fewer people mining. Okay, so Satoshi did this on purpose to give himself power and to gain a massive amount of coins that nobody else will ever be able to come close to having. Okay, and so Satoshi did this obviously to give power to himself. That alone is an issue because money should be competitive, and if you put all your faith in one person, if he fails, then the coin fails. But the real issue is the fact that Bitcoin's eventual inflation rate of 0% will crush the loanable funds market. You can't have a properly functioning loanable funds market with 0% inflation. If you've ever read Mises talks about this extensively. He talks about there is the market creation of money, which is totally fine, but it becomes a problem when you have when the state comes in and creates money by fiat. Okay, so Mises talks about the creation of gold and silver in mines and stuff like that, and he says that's totally fine, and this actually serves a purpose, and this is beneficial to the market. Satoshi decided to go with a 0% inflation rate, which that's obviously an inefficiency. But again, if you have an increasing population and increasing wealth within this population, if you're a business who takes out a loan, not only do you have to pay back interest on the loan so that the bank makes money, but you also have to fight against the increasing value of the money that you are using. And so this means that every business who takes out a loan is experiencing losses that are directly equivalent to the value in which money increases. And if you've ever read Mises when he talks about his critiques on socialism, especially his essay, Socialist or Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, he talks about the arguments that socialists make against money, and their argument is that money's not perfect, and so we need to get rid of it because the ideal way to have a society is where economic calculation is determined by value, where you just determine what has more value and you do that. And since money is not money is not value, it's just the market's best estimation of value. They say there's inefficiencies here that socialism can fix. Now, obviously, in these essays, Mises is talking about, well, you can't do any better than the market's choice of money. It's the best thing you have. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing you have. And there's an implicit argument through Mises's argument against socialism that the ideal money would be a unit of value. And so obviously, if Bitcoin's got a 0% inflation rate, the value of it has to continually rise. It has to. There's no way around this. And the problem with this is that obviously it does not best represent a unit of value. What you actually want is something like gold and silver, where the inflation rate is determined through a market mechanism, where when demand increases for gold and silver, so does the production of gold and silver by, more equipment being used in mines, more people being employed to go mine gold. There's a market mechanism for this. Okay, there's no market mechanism that evens out supply and demand for Bitcoin. And it's sort of stupid that people promote Bitcoin as a market money when it's by definition it's not. It's got a quota on its supply. So it's somewhat market based, but one of the most important aspects of Bitcoin is socialistic by design. And this is where propertarians can actually make their inroads, is because Bitcoin itself has weaknesses. They can actually replace it. And again, in 1 decade, Bitcoin went from a fad to having a market capitalization of 300 billion. So it wouldn't take that long for propertarians to be involved in the creation of basically a Bitcoin killer, and then they would be in control of the money power. You have to control the money power if you want to have success in politics. This is, again, the Propertarians. If you look at the videos of the guy John Mark, he's got a video talking about wealth and how it's the number one or the first rule of a great society. Well, the first rule of wealth is you need money. You need the money power, okay? And so propertarians need to make some inroads in gaining the money power, or gaining some form of a money power. And now where this gets super interesting, and this is why I think propertarians, as opposed to anybody else, will succeed in ways that nobody else can succeed, is the fact that Bitcoin's consensus is actually determined through basically digital warfare, okay? And so when I say Bitcoin consensus, I mean with Bitcoin, you have all these miners that are hashing away. Bitcoin uses the SHA-256 hash algorithm. And they're all trying to mine new Bitcoin, but how do you, Bitcoin is decentralized, meaning nobody is in control of it. It's not like PayPal, where there's a central PayPal server that decides which ledger is correct. It's all these people working on their own ledgers, but the ledgers are all going to be the same ledger, and the way that they keep the ledger the same is through mining, which again, mining, you run these machines that take electricity and they create coins, right? Well, if you're working on the wrong chain or the wrong coin, the blocks that you create will get orphaned. They won't be, they won't be orphaned. You just won't be able to create blocks as fast as everybody else, because whichever chain has the most hash power or miners on it, that's the chain with the most work. And by definition, the way that Bitcoin functions is that the chain with the most work or hash power is the legitimate chain. So you're forced to cooperate with other miners to the extent that if you want to be mining legitimate Bitcoins, you have to be working on the chain with the most work, okay? And so what this means is that if you try and take Bitcoin and you try and mine your own chain, it's meaningless, because you don't have the most hash power or work behind it. Okay, and so where you can actually utilize this flaw in Bitcoin, where it has a socialistic money supply, is that socialistic money supply actually murders miners due to the fact that when the price of Bitcoin goes up, everybody invests in miners, and then the price of Bitcoin drops because, again, there's no way for the supply to reach equilibrium with the demand, because the supply curve, it's a straight fucking line. It's a straight line. You can't. It just doesn't work very well, and so this actually causes bankruptcies of a lot of miners. We're going through that stage right now where a lot of miners are in huge pain, and so the problem with this is, for Bitcoin, the problem is if you create a version of Bitcoin that has a market-based mechanism of determining its inflation rate, that market-based inflation rate version of Bitcoin will be more profitable to mine. And so if it's more profitable to mine, you can actually gain more hash power than you have on Bitcoin. And just so you guys know, I don't want to go into too many details, because again, this is a video aimed at propertarians, but the way that you create a market-based version, or a market-based inflation rate for a different version of Bitcoin is you link the block reward to hash power. Okay, technically speaking, there's no way to determine hash power on the Bitcoin network, but you can determine, or you can link it through what is called the difficulty. And I'm not going to go through that right now, but it's the same thing as linking it to the hash power, where you just say, okay, if you have more miners mining on this, then the block reward will increase. And you have to be careful about how you do this. And again, this is just an introductory version or video for Propertarians, so I'm not going to go over how you do this and the different way or the different things you have to watch out for, because I'm not trying to get Propertarians involved in Bitcoin or new versions of Bitcoin that will kill the original Bitcoin yet. I'm just saying this is something you guys need to pay attention to, and because of your understanding of economics, you will understand, like, you'll be able to grasp this very quickly, okay? And again, if you create this version, a new version of Bitcoin that actually has a market-based inflation rate, you can gain more hash power. But where it gets super interesting is that hash power is not constrained to one chain or one coin. So if you have a competitor to Bitcoin and you gain more hash power to it, you can actually move your hash power over to Bitcoin, and you can basically sabotage and kill it. And this gets very important when you understand the fact that if you actually have a market-based inflation rate on a competitor to Bitcoin, what will actually happen is your coin will have a much smaller market capitalization, and it'll have much lower value than Bitcoin, but you'll have more hash power. So you'll be smaller than Bitcoin, but you'll be able to kill it. And this is a massive display of power. And not only is it a massive display of power, it's incredibly profitable. But because of the fact that Bitcoin will be bigger than your coin, so you'll be able to run a massive propaganda campaign that says, hey, look, we have the legitimate version of, you call it Nakamoto consensus, that's the consensus determined by mining. We're the legitimate version. We just killed Bitcoin and we're smaller than them, and you'll actually absorb a lot of the market share. You'll gain a lot of new market share just because of the hype that your coin will have, and you gain a massive amount of profits. Again, this is an introductory version or video for Propertarians, so I'm not going to go through the math. But even if you assume Bitcoin has become the world reserve currency, and it's doing all the transactions that humans do, you can actually create a coin that's, it can be even 1/10 of the size of Bitcoin. You can attack Bitcoin and you can perform a hash, they call it a hash war when you aggressively try to kill a coin. You can perform a hash war that lasts for decades. Okay, you don't need a hash war to last for decades, and technically speaking, when you're doing a hash war, you are spending money for this hash war. It's like any war. You want to spend as little time in the war as possible, and you just want to get in, do your business, and get out. Okay, but it's so profitable that you can do these hash wars for up to a decade, if not more. Okay. And so the point here is that your average person, again, if Propertarians want to gain the money power through Bitcoin, you don't just create and get on board with a coin that is superior to Bitcoin, because your average person doesn't understand the economics or tech. Propertarians will understand the economics, and I know Kurt Doolittle himself has a background in computer science, and he's a tech guy, so he will understand the economics and the tech, but your average person will not. But they will understand power. So if you want to get the people on your coin, you don't try and explain the economics or tech to them. You utilize these hash wars as massive displays of power, and then you simultaneously have propaganda campaigns. And again, when I'm saying propaganda, I'm using the legitimate definition of propaganda, which is just, it's basically advertising. Okay, that's all I'm saying, is you advertise your coin as being the best. Now, where it gets even more important is the fact that aggressive displays of power are most attractive and most persuasive to military types. Okay, if you want to gain the support of the military, displays of power where you are aggressively killing other coins is the way to do it. Okay, military types don't want you to talk about, oh, we're going to bring freedom and peace and love to the world. They want you to prove to them that you are the best. They want results. Okay, and this form of digital warfare, in the form of hash wars, and this specifically because the words surrounding this are military style words, they will be most drawn to this. Okay, and so if you want to gain support of the military and you want them to be on your side by paying them with a new form of money, if it's a form of money that displays its power through military means, this is the most effective way to do it. I like watching a lot of videos and listening to podcasts by a guy named Jocko Willink. He's a former Navy SEAL, and he talks about how he thinks in the future there like warfare could be moved to something like completely digital. He's not talking specifically about something like Bitcoin, but I've seen a lot of similarities in what he speaks of and how digital warfare will be carried out in terms of how hash wars and wars within the world of Bitcoin are carried out. So for people like him, they will definitely be drawn to this. And again, this is not something where you tell the military like, oh, go buy my version of Bitcoin, get involved in it. This is just to show them that you are the new power. And it's to show them in an undeniable way, in a way that nobody can try and argue against. Okay, and this is the other thing that I really like about Propertarians is they don't necessarily talk about trying to argue with people. They just talk about using displays of power to prove that they are the dominant force, okay? And that's one thing, I absolutely love it, okay? I absolutely love it, okay? Now, the question that you're going to be asking yourself is, if I'm not trying to advise for you guys to get involved, if I'm not trying to advise for you guys to invest in these things, what is it that Propertarians should do, or at least in my estimation, what is it that Propertarians should do? The answer is very simple. Nothing, okay? You should initially do nothing. No one should enter the space of Bitcoin or crypto without education. One of the things I've made fun of a lot of supposed white nationalists for is that they support versions of Bitcoin or versions of crypto that are like they're actively trying to replace white populations in the Western world. Like a lot of these people do incredibly stupid stuff in this space, so you shouldn't enter the space without an education and understanding of what it is. The good news about this is, again, like I said, Bitcoin has a fatal flaw that allows it to be killed. I've been working for over, it's been almost 2 years now to try and get this version of Bitcoin created. I also work on trying to create intellectual property applications, which we'll talk about a little bit later here on this slide. But initially, you don't need to do anything. You need to wait to see success. Okay, I'm not one of those people who says, "Ooh, you need to get involved. We need your help in order to succeed." This train is already moving. Okay, the train is already moving. I'm only trying to tell you, hey, look, there's a train coming. You better pay attention to it. Otherwise, you're going to get hit by it and you're going to get completely fucked. Okay, so Propertarians should wait to see success. Technically speaking, I don't have any confirmations that any versions of these coins are being created right now. I myself, I've only been a software tester in this field. I know a little bit about computer programming. I took a month where I was working 50-hour weeks during this month, so I had a very limited time to teach myself programming, but I taught myself basic programming in order to create the intellectual property apps that I need. My apps are ugly as hell, but they work. But what I'm trying to say here, I guess, to bring this back to the original point, is that Propertarians should not jump into this until they see success with these versions. I call them, they're called attack coins or predator coins or murder coins. Whatever you want to call them, you should wait to see some success with them. There's going to be multiple points of entry, so it's not something like you have to get in now or you're going to lose. Again, the way that you would supplant Bitcoin is with a version of Bitcoin where the inflation rate is tied to the mining rate, which is, again, just how much capital is invested in creating the coin, which obviously, like, that seems stupidly simple when you say it to not, or people who are not involved in Bitcoin, but when you say to the people in Bitcoin that the inflation rate needs to be tied to the amount of capital that is put there to create the coin, like, they don't understand this. I don't know, they're all a bunch of socialists, but again, you just need to wait to see the success because, again, Bitcoin's not the only version of crypto that exists. There's a lot of different versions and they use different hash algorithms. So there's not just going to be one version of this predator coin, okay? There's not going to be one predator. There's going to be multiple predators. And you don't have to be in there at the beginning. Like, even if you're not there at the beginning, unlike Bitcoin where if you didn't get in there in the beginning, you're getting fucked the longer you wait by not being involved. With these coins, the inflation rate will always rise. Now, again, it rises with diminishing returns and you try to model it in a way that it's going to mimic Bitcoin, and it's actually very simple to do this. You just use logarithmic equations. It's retardedly simple to do it. But but you just wait to see success, and then once you've seen the success that you need, then maybe you start trying to think about getting involved. And the good thing about getting involved is the best way to get involved eventually would probably be just through mining the coins themselves, and mining it's very easy to do. If a Predator coin gets released, I will be releasing how-to videos to show anybody, like it doesn't matter if you have any tech background at all, I will show you how to run these miners and get them started. It's very easy to do, but beyond just things like mining these coins or putting your own money to invest in these coins, like that's not even the only way you get involved. The creation of useful applications is just as important as the creation of the coins or owning the coins. Okay, and this gets really important because one thing that I hear Propertarians talk about all the time is the fact that truth-telling is what separates Western civilizations from other civilizations, right? So Bitcoin itself, it's an immutable ledger, and what it's best at is providing, a record of proof that nobody can deny. A proof of events, certain events happening, proof that you've done something, and no one can deny. Like if it's on the blockchain, you can't deny it because it's protected by all this proof of work. So in order for somebody to lie about something on the blockchain, they'd have to buy, so many mining machines that it just makes no sense for them to do it. So nobody can lie about what the blockchain shows. Okay, so if you're talking about reinstating, the truth telling, I guess, within Western civilizations, Bitcoin and blockchains are like that's specifically what they do. Now, the final point I want to leave you guys on, and this is a point that I've been having. These are the apps that I create. I have a lot of trouble getting these apps created by the people within Bitcoin because, like I've said before, a lot of them are socialists. They really don't understand a lot of things like intellectual property. And I'm not sure exactly where the Propertarians stand on intellectual property. I have been influenced by a lot of the libertarians, such as Stephan Kinsella, on intellectual property, in that I think a lot of intellectual property is complete dog shit. However, I do not agree with Stephan Kinsella when he tries to deny intellectual property as a whole. I think the current intellectual property laws are complete dog shit, but I do think there is a place for intellectual property. And one thing that I've seen a lot of these Propertarians talk about is how they're like, eventually I'm going to get banned off social media. I won't be able to say my piece. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's very easy to create intellectual property. I call it intellectual property extraction. It's easy to create applications that extract intellectual property from digital goods, whether it's videos, music, art, podcasts, articles. It doesn't matter what it is. But you can easily extract this, and then if you want to get more complex, and again, this is an introductory version for Propertarians, so I'm not going to talk about this, but even if you're actually actively being censored, there's ways for other people to spread your own intellectual property in such a way that the original creator still receives credit and profit for their creation. Okay, so this is why I think Bitcoin is really big for Propertarians, and again, I'm not saying invest in it. I'm not saying get involved in the original Bitcoin. I think it's fatally flawed. I'm just saying this is something you guys need to be paying attention to, because not only can it give you the money power which would be necessary for you guys to gain military support, but the intellectual property extraction apps that you can create within Bitcoin are specifically useful for white Christians, because those are the people who the intellectual property of white Christians in the Western world is being defiled. They get banned, they get censored. Google, there's articles that always talk about how Google, it's racist specifically against white people. You can stop all this with the use of something like Bitcoin, and the good news about it is you can do it for a fraction of a cent, to the point that it's basically free. And technically speaking, a lot of these applications that are created, they will cover the cost themselves to the user, because the cost to the user is so low that they'll pay for these costs through advertisements within their applications and things like this. But anyways, I think that Bitcoin is something that Propertarians should be paying attention to. And again, I'm not telling you guys that you need to get involved or this will not work without you. I'm telling you that this train is already starting to leave the station. I'm heavily involved in these things that I'm talking to you guys about, and even though this Predator coin does not yet exist, I'm making a lot of gains on getting it created. And again, I'm not saying once the Predator coin comes out that you guys need to be involved with it. I'm just saying pay attention, and I'm going to show something to you guys, again, through a display of power that is unmistakable. There will be no way that you will be able to deny the power of what I'm talking about after I have after this predator has been created, and after, you know, we start killing other coins and we prove our dominance through these display of powers. There will be no denying it. Okay, so again, this is something that I think you guys should be paying attention to. I know you're probably, to some extent, you don't necessarily believe the things I'm talking about, but I will prove these things to you, and I will show you that if Propertarianism wants to succeed, and it wants to succeed with the least amount of pain possible, Bitcoin or new versions of Bitcoin are going to be a great tool for you guys. So anyways, if you got all the way to the end of this video, I want to thank you, and there will be more videos coming out soon.